Greetings again. Still the same day as it was last time I did the reading, but see now. Oh, I'm having some Belgian French beer. It's called Left, and a sausage. Pepperette. See what the temperature is. That's 20 degrees Celsius. By the way, when I'm at about 80 Celsius, 90 Celsius, that's about 170 to 180 degrees, which is good for the alcohol that I'm making. So I have more than 700 milliliters in this one here from the first batch, and I got a third of a jar here. I should be able to get this one full as well. We'll see. Anyways, because I have a lot in there. But anyways, we're going to be reading. I figured you guys deserve, after having waited so long, you deserve another chapter. So today, we're reading from chapter 20, Confessions Keep On Coming. Now, in the last chapter, Albert and Stevie were having, basically, they were having this session. We're trying to figure out what happened and how they got where they got to. And they're partially communicating verbally and audibly, and partially through telepathy. Anyway, so in the last paragraph was, so for now, Shaun, Allison, and Ryerson were to know nothing of the modules, the crash of the spaceship, or their combined effects under the lights. Perhaps at some later time we might reveal the whole story to them, but for now it would be best to hide the modules and forget about them. Only time will tell if we made the right decision. So therein lies your answer to the big question, Steve. No, we did not make the right decision. And Steve answers, no, we didn't, did we, Mr. Meisner? So now we're on chapter 20 of my first book, ABAJAM Chronicles, Two Families Lost in Time. The confessions keep on coming. Excuse me. First things first. Okay. Yeah, a little bit of promotion, eh? I don't know if I'll ever get the first sponsor. So, here we go. Just as I had predicted, hoped actually, Steve and I emerged from that most enlightening episode unscathed and with our wits intact. That was the good news. It was not to say we weren't troubled by some of the revelations we were witness to, or the things we were accountable for. As for my so-called, superpower, all it did was make me painfully aware of the degree of my responsibility and contribution to our current dilemma. Fortunately, my powers enabled me to shield Steve's thoughts from seeing into my mind and learning the full extent of my culpability. Some things are best left unsaid, or in this case, thought. Other than the faint light given off by the screen of my laptop computer, my room was in total darkness. I imagine it was also dark outside because my blinds were open and no light came in through the window. I looked at the clock on my laptop and indicated it was just past 10 p.m. Now that was really peculiar. Not the time, mind you, but the power still remaining in my laptop's batteries. Steve and I had been working on that last segment of my chronicle for over 3.5 hours. It's not that I had written much down, it's just that my battery indicator read it still carried a full charge. I casually mentioned this unexpected benefit to Steve, and he recounted to me how Jason had observed the same peculiarity about my camera's batteries. Even when Jason was taking live video, which everyone knows uses an inordinate amount of power, especially when zooming in and out, the batteries in the camera seemed to go on and on like the Energizer Bunny. He never needed to use the spare batteries I had left for him. That would explain why the house's solar batteries didn't seem to drain as rapidly as one would expect when they were the sole source of household electricity, with or without sunshine. And the wind turbine hadn't been fixed yet. Oops, my bad. At least with this revelation, There was now no immediacy to fixing the wind turbine. It was one less priority to worry about for the time being. So now we have yet another profound mystery about this place, albeit a positive one to consider. I just can't think of anything negative about that benefit. Yeah, Steve, I am trying to be funny with that subtle reference to polarities. Ha ha. I went over and glanced out the side window before closing the blinds. The whole yard was draped in darkness. All the windows of my dad's suite above the garage were likewise dark. The only time a light would be seen from one of his windows was if one of us were visiting him. Being blind, he didn't need any lights. I wondered if he were sleeping or somewhere about, either here in the house or even possibly in the barn. He wasn't much of a sleeper before the incident, even less so now. There was light coming from the barn's workshop. No doubt Bill was busy with whomever, doing whatever, and burning the late-night oil, literally. I could hear the muted sound of one of my generators emanating from somewhere within the barn. Thank God Bill's here, I thought again. As you so profoundly exclaimed 12 years ago, and just a few moments ago, as well, you are a damned good mechanic, regardless of your penchant for profanity and other shortcomings. I carefully made my way over to my gun cabinet, trying not to stub my foot in the dark. I removed the large decorative glass kerosene lamp from the top and brought it over to my desk. I set it squarely in the middle, trimmed the wick, and carefully lit it. It gave off a warm and soft light and added considerably to the weak glow given off by my laptop. Still interested in carrying on, Steve? Want to talk about what happened with you and Shaun? Will this be on the record, like written in your chronicles? Only if what you have to tell me is pertinent to our being here. Besides, it's not as if tens of thousands of people will ever read these chronicles. That's a sort of like inside subtle joke. They're primarily a record for us, about us, and a document for whomever finds us. Let's just say in the future, if we don't get out of here. You mean archaeologists digging up our carcasses 500 years from now? Yeah, you could put it that way if you'd like. Just don't repeat that to your mother or my wife, and especially not to Andrea. At this moment, you and I may think that's funny, but to them right now, it's not at all funny. Don't worry, I'm not that stupid. Not with all her martial arts skills. She'd kick my ass, especially now with her fiancé in his condition. Gotta check the concoction and the temperature. That's still cold. We're looking at 30 degrees Celsius. All right. Looking good. Oh, this is my fiance's cup from the sun. Don't ask me how she got it. So why don't you take the lead this time? This way we can see how developed your gift is. I'm thinking we could call our capability for combining telepathy and empathy as a telepathic power. What do you think? Yeah, sure. That definition works for me, assuming the whole telepathic gift works for me as well. Otherwise, it'll just be you, Mr. Meisner, who's got this talent. That would pretty much render your definition moot, at least as far as it concerns me. Fair enough. There's only one way to find out. I'll let my mind be the passive recipient for you, and I will draw the line at head slaps. My game, my rules. Well, yeah, but I will draw the line at head slaps. Having established some basic working parameters, we settled in for another session of tripping, or maybe even stumbling down memory lane. This time Steve would be in control, sort of. I could sense Steve was still a bit reluctant to divulge too many details of his personal life to anyone, especially me. I never intended to completely relinquish control, not when I'm still so unfamiliar with whatever aspects are associated with this so-called gift, and definitely not to someone who's more of a novice at this than me. And so we drifted back into each other's thoughts. I guess you could say the whole affair of my brother Shaun betraying our family really began shortly after I started my first year of college. That was back in 2003. I interrupted Steve. Pretty significant year for all of us, you'll agree. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Anyway, I had taken a year and a half off after completing high school to work with Dad. He appreciated me working with him in the business, even though I knew deep down he would have much preferred Shaun working there. I didn't mind that so much, and besides, I needed the money for college. Anyway, by the time Shaun had been in the by that time, Shaun had been in the army, I guess just over 4 years. It was me who first initiated contact with him. I wanted to see how he was doing, but more to the point, I wanted to solicit some advice from him about dating and girls. If you've read my thoughts, you've probably seen that back then I was pretty awkward around girls. I never really dated any girls in high school or attended any of the dances. To avoid the issue, I merely focused all my attention and time on my studies. I was kind of a nerd back then. I know Jason was somewhat like me in that way, but because he grew up with 2 sisters, he didn't feel as uncomfortable around girls as I did. Anyway, there was this really cute girl in one of my classes that I had asked out on a date. Her name was Alice. Yeah, I know, I was 21 and I hadn't gone out on a real date with a girl yet, so I really didn't know how to act or what was expected of me. Shaun never seemed to have difficulty in that regard. I never knew him to be without a girlfriend or 2, so I figured he'd be my best resource for girl and dating information. When I called him, he told me he was coming up to visit for us for the weekend and would fill me in on everything he knew about chicks then. Not before and not over the phone. He even joked around on the phone that when he was done teaching me the ins and outs of what women want, I'd be well equipped to get my first piece of tail that very weekend. In hindsight, as you say, Mr. Meisner, I should have realized asking Shaun for advice on women was like asking him to be a designated driver at one of your Oktoberfest parties. Alice would never have been his type. She was way too nice. His type of girlfriend was definitely not my type, at least not back then. Probably not even now. Way too skanky. I admit my taste in women has changed since then, but so have I. My last 2 girlfriends either rode with me on my bike or had their own bike. Alice, on the other hand, would never ride on the back of a bike, let alone own one. But that first year in college, I needed all the help and advice I could get. Not just bad advice, which is what my older brother essentially gave me. Shaun arrived from Petawawa Friday afternoon just before I got home from college. Mom made the mistake of assigning him my bedroom. It was the largest bedroom except for theirs. She had forgotten the other module was hidden in my closet. Shaun should have gotten the spare room, but this was Shaun after all. Between my parents and Ryan all vying for his attention, I hardly got a chance to talk to him all that night. You've got to understand that regardless of what my brother did in the past, he was now a corporal in the army, and the folks, yeah, even me, were all pretty proud of him, especially Mom. Shaun was way up before everybody that Saturday morning, even without the blaring strains of morning reveille. He got me out of bed early that morning by softly whistling reveille directly into my ear. He suggested we go for a walk and talk. He told me how it was nice to have a few days off with the family and how he really looked forward to helping me out with my love life. Excuse me. Yeah. Water's good. 40 Celsius. Temperature's fine. Fire's good. Okay. Whoa, 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 whoa. I'll put that down on the ground before she breaks. Fall was the best and favorite time of year for the both of us. There would be no mosquitoes or black flies to annoy or distract us. The mornings were cool and fresh, and the transition of the leaves from green to a rainbow of colors was always made Shaun glad to be who he was. He always felt proud of his Cree heritage, more so than me, regardless of however far removed. He confided to me it made him appreciate nature a lot more than many of his army buddies. Oh, let's scratch. We leisurely strolled around the property, breathing in the smell of the early morning autumn air. We walked down the short washboard gravel road to its dead end, and stepped into the brush where we had to briskly clamber up a sharp rock ledge to gain a better view of the surrounding terrain. He took his time surveying the whole area. He confessed he'd almost forgotten how beautiful the area around our home was, especially now as the region's regrowth had fairly taken root. No more stunted trees or barren rock. Out here and from this vantage point, he said he felt tall and strong, reborn and akin with the land. Did you know Shaun was equally proud to be part French as he was Cree? And he was never ashamed to say he came from Sudbury. No, I didn't, I replied in my mind. To be fair, I didn't know your brother all that well, other than what I had heard from Andrea about his antics and the trouble he caused in her class. I knew He and Andrea sometimes came to you and Jason's rescue if some bullies were picking on you guys. Oh, don't feign embarrassment. Nothing disgraceful about getting rescued by an older sibling. Besides, you boys were always outnumbered and picked on because you were the brains in the class and the teacher's pet back in those days. And of course, my daughter was very good at jiu-jitsu even back then. Hell, Mr. Miser, she was one of the best athletes at Birchwood Elementary for a girl. Better javelin thrower than most of the guys. But I'll never say that to her face. Yes, well, I did meet Shaun at your old farm on a couple of occasions. I do recall that incident when he took you and Jason out on that three-wheeled ATV, rolled it, and then denied being at fault, even when the truth was discovered later on. Other than that, what I now know, I gleaned, so to speak, from your mom the other day. Well, he said he felt he had the same rugged, indomitable spirit as the region's miners, trappers, and men who gave rise to Sudbury's rough and tumble reputation. Probably why he liked fighting so much, even in school. Lots of friends' dads worked in the mines. Shaun was also unlike many of his fellow enlisted companions. He told me most of the other recruits were from big cities like Toronto, Winnipeg, or Montreal. Many of them couldn't get decent jobs, so they chose the Army. For them, the Army seemed to be the only and best option of last resort. I remember both of us laughing because for him, it was the only resort, with prison as the other option. He also believed a lot of his fellow soldiers, especially the Anglos, had no sense of identity. The recruits from Quebec, whether they hailed from some backwater township or big cities like Montreal and Quebec, all seemed to enjoy a greater sense of camaraderie. He thought the other big cities like Toronto, Calgary, and Edmonton didn't evoke the same emotion or response as declaring you were from Quebec, or even Sudbury for that matter. To outsiders, these places always conjured up pictures of farmers or miners, loggers and trappers, hard-working, hard-drinking, and all of them hard-fighting. I'm not attempting to make a joke or play on words here, Mr. Meisner, but Shaun said to me he felt like an alien amongst the other soldiers. He told me at the time this was where he belonged. The only reason he was in the Army was because the judge had suggested he volunteer. Well, maybe not for much longer. That's when he disclosed his plans to leave the Army, when his latest hitch was up. Just under a year. He and I talked about future plans for a while, and then we segued onto the topic of girls. I tell you, if my mom were here with us right now, I'd have to close off her mind from what Shaun discussed with me that morning. I never realized the extent of his conquests, as he described them. Let's just say it bolstered my confidence in the wrong way and gave me some misguided and false expectations. Excuse me. After that, we started back down to the house. By the time everyone was awake, even Dad, who usually likes to sleep in on Saturdays, I guess not that day, but with Shaun being home, the two of them went out to the garage while I helped Mom with breakfast. Shaun wanted to talk to Dad alone. Anyway, getting back to date night, and to make a long story short, my date turned out to be a catastrophe. I acted on Shaun's advice only to end up getting slapped in the face and being called a pig by Alice. She wouldn't even let me drive her home. She took a cab and refused my offer to pay. How embarrassing is that? I was so bummed out at the disaster of my first date that I ended up doing something real stupid. I went to the Senator Hotel, Shaun's old haunt, and got drunk that night. First time in my life, too. You want to know what else I did that was sheer stupidity? I actually drove home. It's a good thing Highway 69 doesn't have too much traffic on it early Sunday morning, because God only knows how I made it home safely that night. Anyway, no one heard me sneak into the house around 3 in the morning. Barclay, he was still a pup then, was the only one who greeted me outside. After old Priest died, we still needed a good watchdog, so we got Barclay from one of Dad's customers. A good watchdog, we needed a good watchdog, so we got Barclay from one of Dad's customers in a stare. Anyways, once he recognized me, he just returned to his doghouse and ignored me. I remember watching him circling his threadbare old tattered mat 2 or 3 times before plopping down and going back to sleep. I felt my whole world spinning around just like that. From there, I pretty much unconsciously staggered straight through my assigned bedroom and plopped down face first. I do remember grunting to myself in disgust after collapsing into bed and thinking how my older brother didn't know everything about women after all. At least not decent women like Alice. I felt so stupid and confused that night, and of course really, really sick. After that, I passed out, still fully dressed. Shaun and the rest of the family had been awake for some time that Sunday morning when I stumbled my way to the washroom. The house still smelled of breakfast, which only helped to increase my nausea. That was my first experience of having a hangover, and I wasn't enjoying it. To be truthful, since then, I still don't enjoy them any better. I don't know how my brother did it back then, but he used to get drunk every weekend. At least that's one personality trait and common experience I could proudly boast I was not familiar with. Oh, hi, love. Coming up for a lunch? A snack? Okay. Grab a chair, have a seat. Didn't mean to eavesdrop on you, Steve, but I know you do get high on a semi-regular basis. So in all fairness, all you've done is trade alcohol for marijuana. I don't want you to think I'm judging you or condemning you. Shit, the other day I was trying to drink myself into a stupor. Mind you, it was chiefly motivated by our current circumstances. Frank's condition, Andrea's feelings towards me right now, and everyone's expectations of me. Bernie doesn't seem to think those are legitimate excuses, but what does she know? She's never been drunk a day in her life. And mind you again, that would have been my first drunk since winning the lottery and my second since we moved from Dowling. That's a lot of sober years in between and very few regrets. And yeah, I did what you did when I was in my late teens, so I know the effects that it's imperative. When I was 19, a bunch of us killed a large bottle of tequila, smoked a bomber, and then took off down Highway 401. I was so ripped I stood on the seat of my big old 750 Royal Enfield and bounced the bike down the ramp. Just like you said earlier, only God knows how I survived that night of stupidity. So now, where were we again? My hangover, my smoking dope, and you're right about it being a moot point now. I seriously doubt I'll be smoking up anytime soon here. And like you found out, drinking ain't gonna cut it out here either. Boy, could I sense a degree of resentment and hostility in the tone of his thoughts, as I was being told by Steve to mind my own business. Time to check the temperature. Ready to stretch. Okay, temperature's up to 130 Fahrenheit, 50 Celsius. Water's still good. Okay, back to reading. Well, first thing first, here. Anyways, ... Shaun had no real business rummaging through my closet that morning, but for whatever reason, curiosity had gotten the better of him. Besides, before he had moved out, this was his bedroom. I guess he wanted to see if any of his old belongings were still stored here. I know he found his old pair of Civil War boots, you know, the kind with the square toes. They were on the floor by his feet. Those boots were kind of worn and they did need a good polish. That's one thing you get good at in the Army, he told me, polishing boots. There was something else he found buried in the back of the corner of my long, narrow closet. Want to guess what it was? After retching my guts out, I freshened up as best as could be expected and figured I'd pass up having breakfast. Otherwise, I would pass it up. Aha. My original intention was to confront my so-called wise brother and let him know how his advice to me was pure bullshit. When I walked in on him, I discovered he was busy examining the module and fingering those little rubbery prongs. At the time, it didn't occur to me what it was he was handling. I had completely forgotten about it. This is the discourse that followed, as fuzzy as it may appear at the time, considering how many brain cells I had killed that night, but it'll explain a lot. Rough night, eh, bro? So how did it go with you and that Alice chick? You clip her wings? He asked me rather crudely. Oh, all wrong, man, I answered with one prolonged moan. My eyes at the time were totally bloodshot from the inside out. I found myself squinting hard against the morning light. It was a complete disaster last night, I added. He leaned against the opposite wall for support. My comments must have taken him aback. He tossed the module on my bed and crossed his huge muscular arms over an equally huge chest. Being in the army had really shaped him up. I did just like you instructed me, Shaun. I said some of those things that were supposed to make her feel like a real attractive woman. I listened to her said things to make her feel sexy. I let her know she was really hot and stuff. I tried to say it right, in my own way. When I put my arm around her, she didn't seem to mind that. We started kissing, and then I put my hand on her leg. She didn't really resist, but she did squirm a little. I thought she was playing coy, so I moved my hand in closer and up her skirt. Man, that's when she slapped me hard in the face, called me a pig, and hopped out of the car. Wow, she slapped you? I would have slapped that bitch right back. So how'd she get home? You know, Mr. Miser, at that moment, if I wasn't feeling so wasted, I might have taken a slug at my older brother, even as muscular and as strong as he was, but at least I defended the honor of Alice. No, Shaun, she's not a bitch, and I deserved that, what I got. And for your information, she took a cab and refused my offer to pay for it. I should never have listened to your advice about women. I could actually see Steve putting his fingers to his temples that morning, all the while trying desperately to rub the throbbing away, but to no avail. How well I know that feeling from my younger days. Only after losing my temper with my brother and almost sitting on top of the module did I come to realize what it was again. Where'd you find this, Shaun? I asked him, feeling somewhat perplexed at rediscovering the module and him snooping in my closet. Buried in the back of the closet. Why? What is it? Some weird old toilet seat Mom bought at a garage sale and Dad wouldn't use? No, it's not a toilet seat at all. I'd forgotten we even still had this thing. Me and Jason, you remember him, right? We call it a module. Wow, it's been so many years. And all that time hidden in the back of this closet. What do you mean you call it a module? Why was it hidden? Oh, that's right. I just remembered. Still in a bit of a hungover daze and not thinking clearly. You never knew about this thing. We weren't supposed to say anything to you about it. At least not at the time. What the hell are you rattling on about? Shaun demanded. Why couldn't you tell me about this stupid-looking toilet seat, or module, or whatever you want to call it? He was starting to get a little impatient, and more than annoyed with me. I guess the idea that he'd been excluded from a family secret really bothered him. I had to pause for a few moments to collect my confused and jumbled thoughts. We called it a module, and it came from a spaceship that Jason and I saw crash when we were up north with his dad in his truck. Remember when you picked us up and dropped us off in Dowling, back when you had just moved out? I think it was in the summer of... I actually had to think hard for a moment to recall it was the summer of '96. Just what the hell do you mean by a spaceship? And why shouldn't I have been told about any of this? This so-called fucking spaceship. Shaun railed at me. He was getting quite angry now, to the point of hostility. I actually thought I just might have to fight him after all. I've never felt so intimidated or fearful of Shaun. So I didn't feel compelled to recount the whole exact story to him. And the way I was feeling towards him at the time, there was little that Shaun could do to make me feel any worse. In the retelling, I decided to leave out the part where you had actually boarded the ship and retrieved the 2 modules. I provided Shaun with only a vague recounting of the events of that night. In truth, I actually found it difficult to recall some of the specific details of that whole event, and have to say I was somewhat relieved. I really didn't want to lie to Shaun, but I didn't want to reveal too much either, not without Mom or Dad knowing about it. Shaun just sat there spellbound, now and then picking up the module and closely examining it for some sign of or confirmation that what he was hearing was actually true. He knew me well and knew I wouldn't deliberately lie to him. Besides, like my mom will tell everyone, I've always been a lousy liar. Who else knows about this module thing you wanted to know? Just me and the Meisners, I told him. Well, actually, I don't think Ryan or Jason's younger sister, Allison, know about it. And right up until now, neither did you. He asked me again, only this time he was clearly more agitated. So why the fuck wasn't I told? Mom and Dad felt it wouldn't be a wise thing to do, seeing you were always getting into trouble at the time. I would have told you sooner, but I completely forgot about it. Seeing it here on the bed forced me to actually recall what happened then and reminded me we still had the thing. I then went on to explain to Shaun why they never turned the module over to the authorities. But as I went on, I could sense Shaun was growing more and more perturbed that this secret, and a significant one at that, had been kept from him. No doubt he was feeling a sense of betrayal. Perhaps the thought occurred to him that he was no longer part of our family. A lot of Mom and Dad's misgivings he brought on himself, I'm sorry to say. Even then I was concerned whether I could trust him with this information. Obviously, now in hindsight, God, I'm getting to hate that word. I was wrong in trusting him. I now realize my brother Shaun actually played me for a fool that morning. He pretended to take no interest in the module, tossing it back onto the bed, as if discarding some cheap curio of novelty. He said to me, "If this fucking thing was such a spectacular find, and it really came from a flying saucer, as you claim, you wouldn't have forgotten about it or just hidden it in the closet. Give me a break and some credibility, okay, Steve? And don't try to put that bullshit story on me. Whatever it is, it's obviously being kept a secret. Well, at least it makes for a nice souvenir and conversation piece. That is when and if the Meisners ever come here for a visit, seeing that nobody else knows about it. Not even me." I too felt the sting that Steve must have felt at that moment when Shaun made his snide and sarcastic remark. Regrettably, it was all too true, what he had said back then. We were the only other people who knew about it, and our families hadn't seen each other in years. Hang on, got it checked. Concoction, stretch my back. Okay, how's the water? Water's fine. It's 60 Celsius, almost 150 Celsius. Fahrenheit. Yep. Still recording. That's good. Need another swig of beer. This book reading is brought to you by Left, French-Belgian beer that's brown and blonde. Now, just a little commercial break. Okay, so we were the only other people who knew about it, and our families hadn't seen each other in years. In that respect, Steve, Shaun was right. Family should trust family, not just distant friends who rarely called or rarely visited. Well, Mr. Meisner, that'll never justify what Shaun did. Who knows, maybe it was the modules that deliberately kept us apart. That still doesn't excuse my brother for betraying the family. Right after telling him, I couldn't help but feel ill at ease. Imagine distrusting my own brother, not knowing if the secret was safe with him or not. After our discussion, I put the module back into the closet where it had sat, forgotten all those long years. We left the bedroom together, but a definite chill had come between us. We both headed towards the kitchen because we could hear Mom and Dad talking. I desperately needed a coffee, but first a whiz. Ryan hurried past me, squeezing between me and Shaun on his way to the bathroom, hoping to be there first, in a one John house. I went straightway to the kitchen with Shaun to get my coffee first. The whiz would have to wait, as I had no choice. Besides, I wanted to be there just in case he brought up the little discussion we just had. He never did. When I finally did get to the bathroom, Ryan had ducked into my room and was playing and rummaging around in my closet. I was actually concerned I might have to explain the module to him as well. That would not sit well with Mom, but he never did inquire about it. The rest of that Sunday was spent with Shaun, either working in the garage with Dad or in the kitchen chatting with Mom and drying dishes. Both Mom and Dad grilled him all the time with questions as to his future and possible career choices. Dad was constantly hoping Shaun was giving serious consideration to leaving the army and perhaps coming to work for him. Monday morning came all too soon for Mom and Dad, but not soon enough for me. Brian had already been picked up for school in the school bus. Dad was in the garage with one of his assistants, working on a local OPP officer and friend's personal vehicle. Mom and I were both heading into Sudbury, so we gave Shaun a ride to the bus station downtown. I was heading back to Cambrian and not looking forward to it. I knew sooner or later I'd have to confront Alice. I really would have liked to call in sick or skip my class with her, but I was determined to at least apologize to her. She deserved that much. In the end, it actually turned out all right between me and her. Mom dropped me off first, so what happened after that, you might know, but I don't. Nothing really, I added, other than she dropped your brother off at the bus station downtown, then went to work. And that's the end of chapter 20. Next time I read, it'll be chapter 21, An Act of Betrayal. I hope you all enjoyed that. I did. And still waiting for the concoction to brew and make the rest of it. And it's going to be a long afternoon for me. And by the way, in case any of you wondered, this is quite the long beard I have, right? Yeah. Apparently, it's getting close to Christmas. Like I said, it's been a bizarre year, but I'm still doing Santa Claus. Ho, ho, ho! So, I let my beard grow through this whole COVID shutdown, don't go anywhere, do nothing, blah blah blah, and I discovered this kind of a hobby, which is kind of neat. So, anyways, that's the end of it for today. All of you have yourselves a great week. Cue in the background music, and I'll get to editing. On that note, Skål! Welcome back. Now, I don't know exactly where I'm going to insert this segment into my videos, my reading videos, storytime videos, but I just want to update you on my progress. Now, this is the second time I've ever done this, and now these jars all contain basically brandy, homemade brandy from grape juice. And one of the things that's fascinating about all of this is that it's almost like a science experiment going back to school. Because you saw the contraption I had outside. It had the big, huge kettle pot where you put your grape juice in, or your mash, or whatever it is you're using. And of course, and before you even get to that point, I had to buy grape juice. Then I had to mix a lot of sugar with it, proper proportions, and melting the sugar, make sure it's with hot water. And then you don't use extremely hot water with your yeast, because you want to make sure you don't kill the yeast. And then you put that in there, and then you got to monitor it over the next several weeks. With either a bag over top of it and it inflates with the gases from the fermentation, or what they have something it's a plug that you put on your carboy. That's what it's called, a carboy. Don't ask me why. And it has a little valve in it. It's glass and it burps. So it's actually quite fascinating. Anyway, so yeah, now I'm going to measure and see how much alcohol content all my efforts have been. So first of all, you want to make sure that you have a hydrometer and it like a test tube. Again, like a science experiment outside. My barbecue was with the gas burner on the side. It's like a Bunsen burner, and then on top you had the that little pail there with the copper coil in it. By the way, that's called the worm. And you had to constantly keep exchanging the water, keep the water cold, so that the evaporation like the alcohol evaporates between 160, 70 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 80, 85 degrees Celsius. So you're monitoring the temperature, you're cooking what you have inside, and the alcohol's evaporating, and you want to make sure that the water is keeping the worm cool, so that the condensation ends up in your like I was using a measuring cup. So first of all, let's measure. Oops, wrong way. Let's measure to see how much alcohol content. This is the last batch. This is the weaker batch. Okay, like at least I'm assuming it's a weaker batch, because it was pretty much at the end of the run. And as I mentioned at the beginning, when you're doing this when you're making this this product, the first part is called the head. About 4 or 5, 6 ounces that you discard, because it's oh, I forget what the chemical composition is, but anyways, you can use it as fire starter or barbecue lighter. You don't want to drink it. It's stuff that can make you go blind or even kill you. So you get rid of that. I save it as a fire starter. Now, this is a hydrometer. Let's see what the alcohol. Okay, looks like it is 100 proof. Wow. Okay, so anyways, hate to see it go to waste, right? So that's 100 proof. And that's from the end. And so anyways, you keep sipping and tasting it. At the beginning, the stuff that's called the heads, you sip it, but you spit it out. You can taste the harsh, bitter, and well, it's, like I said, it's almost like a lighter fluid. So you don't want to drink that. And in the stuff that you really are saving, this stuff here, this is called the heart. So you got the head, which is the bad stuff. You got the heart, which is the good stuff. And at the end, it's called the tails. And the tails, it's kind of weak, and it's sharp, but it's not flavorful. So you want to get rid of that. So now let's test. Let me see now. We'll test this one here. Now see, it says here, this be the good shit. So let's see what alcohol percentage it is. Okay, that should be enough. Maybe not, just a little bit more. Again, I create this stuff because in my book, as I've mentioned earlier, the people for surviving, they have to create a still to make fuel for their vehicles, and later on when they get oil, they have to distill a fractal distillery to separate the gasoline and the let's just say the kerosene and diesel from the oil that they get. So first of all, let's see what proof this is. Whoa, okay. This here is okay. Now we're looking at about 122 proof. 122 proof. Ooh, wait. And and of course we are making it for our own consumption, not for sale or stuff like that. But the idea is that, you know, it started off as an experiment. I wanted to see if I could do it because I like doing things that are mentioned in my book, just like tall ships are mentioned in my book, and I did a week stint, working week on a tall ship, climbing the rigging and unfurling the mast, climbing on the mast and unfurling the sheets, the sails. But now I know what the percentage is. I can put this away. This is all got to be washed. Now about my book. I have book 2 coming out, hopefully in the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's all done. It's all been what they call the revisions have been approved. I've approved them. So this is about the size of the book. This is book 1. That's about the size of it. And this one here has, what was it? Yeah, 355 pages. Book number 2 has 576 pages. This is what the basically what the book cover looks like. I can't see it too good on the screen, but it'll have to do. Also, I have a poster coming out for my promotion of my book, and this is what the poster looks like. Hopefully you can all see that. Anyways, I really appreciate all of you people watching, and make sure you subscribe, make sure you like press that like button, and tell your friends and family and or any alcoholics that you might know